My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 36 years old, and at 4:17 on the afternoon of my grandfather's funeral, my father looked me straight in the eyes and told me I wasn't family enough to stay for the reading of his will. I was standing in the hallway of the house where I had spent every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, and almost every summer of my childhood. My grandfather's house. The same house where he taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 12. The same kitchen where he used to leave handwritten notes beside my breakfast plate whenever I had an exam. And now my father was standing between me and the dining room as if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. "Claire," he said quietly, "you've already attended the funeral. That's enough." I stared at him. Enough. My older brother Derek was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by relatives, business partners, and my grandfather's attorney. He looked completely comfortable. He always did. Derek had been the family's golden child for as long as I could remember. He was the son who stayed close to home, joined the family construction company, bought the expensive house, married the woman everyone adored, and eventually became the person my grandfather was supposedly preparing to leave everything to. I was the daughter who left. At least, that was the story my family told. My mother appeared behind my father. "Please don't make this difficult," she whispered. I almost laughed. I hadn't said a word. Then Derek leaned back in his chair and gave me the same smile he had been giving me since we were teenagers. "You should probably go, Claire." I looked at him. "Why?" "Because this is about Grandpa's estate and the company. And I'm his granddaughter." Derek shrugged. "You haven't been part of this family business in 8 years. That sentence hit harder than it should have. Not because he was wrong about the 8 years. He was wrong about why I had left. Before I could answer, a woman stepped out of the dining room. Mara Whitmore. My grandfather's attorney for more than 20 years. She was holding 3 sealed envelopes. She looked at my father. Then my mother. Then Derek. Finally, her eyes settled on me. "Claire," she said, "your grandfather left very specific instructions." My father stiffened. Mara held up the smallest envelope. "This one is addressed to you." Derek's expression changed. "What?" Mara looked around the room. "And before anyone leaves, there is something your grandfather specifically instructed me to do." She turned the envelope over. Written across the front, in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. "Claire must hear this with everyone present." My father suddenly looked nervous. And that was the moment I realized something. My grandfather had known exactly what would happen after he died. He had known my family would try to push me out. He had known Derek would expect to inherit everything. And somehow, before his funeral was even over, Grandpa had already made sure they couldn't control the story anymore. 6 months earlier, I still believed my grandfather had died disappointed in me. I was wrong. For most of my childhood, I thought Grandpa Thomas Morgan was the only person in my family who truly saw me. My father, Richard, valued achievement only when it came with status. My mother, Evelyn, valued peace, which usually meant keeping Derek happy. And Derek? Derek valued winning. He could turn almost anything into a competition. When we were children, if I got a better grade on a test, he wanted to know why the teacher had made the test easier for me. If I won an award, he wanted to know who had nominated me. If Grandpa complimented something I had done, Derek would somehow make the conversation about himself. But when Derek was praised, everyone was expected to celebrate. That was simply how our family worked. Derek was the future. I was the difficult one. When we were in high school, Grandpa had started teaching me about his company. Morgan Construction had begun as a small local contractor and grown into a regional business with hundreds of employees and projects across several states. Grandpa wasn't a flashy man. He wore old leather shoes. He drove the same pickup truck for years. He believed that a business was only as good as the people who worked for it. And he liked numbers. I loved that about him. At 16, I would sit in his office after school while he showed me how a company could look profitable on paper while quietly bleeding money somewhere else. "Numbers don't lie," he once told me. "People do." I remembered that sentence years later. Because eventually, I discovered that someone inside Morgan Construction had been lying. It started with a vendor account. I was 27, working in the company's operations department, and Derek had already been promoted into senior management. One afternoon, I noticed that 3 invoices from different companies had nearly identical descriptions. Different company names, different invoice numbers, same amounts, same payment dates. I asked Derek about them. He barely looked up from his laptop. Those are subcontractor expenses. They're identical. So that's unusual. He finally looked at me. Claire, you don't understand how large businesses work. I didn't argue. I went to Grandpa. I showed him the invoices. He stared at them for nearly a minute. Then he closed the folder. Leave it alone. I thought I had misheard him. What? I'm handling it. But you said, Claire. His voice was different. Not angry. Afraid. That scared me more than anger would have. I asked if Derek was involved. Grandpa looked directly at me. Don't ask me that again. I went home that night feeling sick. 2 weeks later, an internal audit discovered a discrepancy. Not a massive one, but enough to cause concern. And somehow my name appeared in the middle of it. A spreadsheet had been accessed using my credentials. A vendor had supposedly been approved by me. I knew I hadn't done it. I told my father. He sighed. My mother told me not to accuse anyone. Derek said I was overwhelmed. Then my father said something I would never forget. Maybe you're simply not suited for this company. I looked at him. What does that mean? It means Derek has the temperament for leadership. And I don't. You make everything personal. That was the family explanation. I was emotional. Derek was strategic. I was suspicious. Derek was practical. I asked too many questions. Derek knew how to keep things moving. Within a month, I resigned. I left Morgan Construction and took a job somewhere else. I stopped attending family dinners. I stopped talking about work. And when people asked why I had left the family company, my parents told them I couldn't handle the pressure. Derek never corrected them. That hurt more than anything. Because Grandpa didn't defend me either. At least, not publicly. Years passed. I built my own career. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of job my mother bragged about at charity dinners. But I was good at it. I learned to trust myself. And every few months, Grandpa would call. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes. Sometimes an hour. He never discussed the company. I never asked. There were certain wounds you eventually stopped touching because you were afraid they'd start bleeding again. Then, 6 months ago, Grandpa called me late one evening. His voice sounded tired. Claire. Yeah. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. I think so. That isn't what I asked. I smiled. Then yes. He was quiet. Finally he said, good. I heard papers moving on his end. Then he said something strange. Whatever happens, don't let anyone convince you that leaving was your failure. My smile disappeared. Grandpa, what are you talking about? I have to go. Wait. But he had already hung up. 3 weeks later, he died. And now I was standing in his house while my father told me I wasn't family enough to hear his final wishes. Mara held up the sealed envelope. Claire, please sit. My father immediately said, Mara, I don't think this is necessary. Mara looked at him. Your father disagreed. Nobody spoke. I walked into the dining room and took the empty chair at the end of the table. Derek looked irritated. My mother looked frightened. My father looked angry. Mara opened the first document. This is the final will and testament of Thomas Morgan. She began reading. The usual things came first. Personal property. Charitable donations. Small inheritances to long-time employees. Then she paused. Regarding Morgan Construction Holdings. Derek leaned forward. My father smiled slightly. I didn't. Mara continued. Thomas Morgan has placed controlling ownership of Morgan Construction Holdings into the Morgan Family Continuity Trust. Derek's smile disappeared. My father sat straighter. Mara continued reading. The controlling beneficiary of the trust is Claire Morgan. Nobody moved. For a second, I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. I looked at Mara. I'm sorry. What? My mother whispered, no. Derek stood. That can't be right. Mara didn't look at him. It is. My father slammed his palm onto the table. This isn't what your grandfather intended. Mara calmly folded the document. I prepared the document myself. Derek stared at me. You knew? No. You're lying. I didn't know. He turned toward my father. Dad. My father didn't answer. And that was the first time I noticed something. My father wasn't shocked that I had inherited control. He was shocked that I had found out. Mara reached for the second envelope. There's more. Derek immediately said no. Mara stopped. Excuse me. You've read the will. I haven't read the letter. You don't need to. Mara looked at him. Your grandfather disagreed. She opened the envelope. The room became completely silent. Dear Claire, she began. My throat tightened. I hadn't heard Grandpa's voice in weeks. But somehow, hearing his words felt like he was sitting across from me. By the time you hear this, you will probably believe I failed you. I lowered my eyes. My mother started crying. I didn't know why. Mara continued. You may believe I chose your brother over you. You may believe I accepted the version of events your parents gave you when you left Morgan Construction. My father stood. Mara, that's enough. She didn't stop. You were right. I looked up. Mara read the next sentence. You were right about the vendor accounts. My heart started pounding. Derek's face went pale. Grandpa knew. He had known. Mara continued. You were also right that the discrepancies were not accidental. My mother whispered, oh God. Derek turned toward her. Mom? She didn't answer. I stared at my father. What did he know? Mara kept reading. He discovered that payments were being routed through companies that had no legitimate relationship with Morgan Construction. Derek stepped away from the table. This is insane. Mara continued. He also discovered that the person responsible had help from inside the company. My father said, this letter is speculation. Mara stopped reading and looked at him. Would you like me to continue? He said nothing. I could barely breathe. For 8 years, I had believed I had imagined the whole thing. I had believed maybe I had misunderstood the invoices. Maybe I had been too young. Maybe I had been jealous. Maybe Derek really was better suited to the company. But Grandpa had known. And he had kept silent. Why? I whispered. Mara looked at me. I think he wanted you to hear the rest. She continued. Claire, I told you to stop asking questions because I was afraid that if you continued, the people involved would realize how much you knew. I covered my mouth. The room blurred for a moment. Grandpa had been protecting me. Not abandoning me. Protecting me. The letter continued. I know you were hurt by my silence. You had every right to be. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry. 2 simple words. They broke something inside me. Because I had spent 8 years waiting for an apology that I never thought would come. Mara turned the page. I investigated the accounts privately. Derek suddenly said, this doesn't prove anything. Mara ignored him. The investigation confirmed that money had been transferred through multiple shell vendors. My father sat down. And the money was eventually used to acquire real estate through a holding company. I looked at Derek. He wouldn't look at me. Who owned the holding company? I asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened a folder. Inside were corporate records. She placed them on the table. 3 beneficiaries. Derek, my father, and me. I stared at the page. What? My mother began sobbing. I turned toward her. Mom? She shook her head. I didn't know about the trust. But you knew about the money. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Derek suddenly laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone whose world was collapsing. This is ridiculous. Grandpa was sick. I looked at him. Then why are you scared? He stopped laughing. My father stood. Claire, listen to me carefully. No. Don't make a decision tonight. You mean don't accept it. I mean don't destroy this family over accusations made by a dying man. I stared at him. Grandpa didn't accuse me of anything. My father went silent. I pointed at the documents. He accused you. Derek's chair scraped backward. You always wanted this. I looked at him. What? The company. Grandpa's approval. Everything. I almost laughed. Derek, I left. Because you couldn't stand losing. No. I left because everyone told me I was the problem. You were. Then why did Grandpa leave me the company? Derek couldn't answer. Mara finally opened the third envelope. This is why. Inside was a forensic accounting report. Not a summary. Not a family explanation. A full independent audit. Pages of transactions. Dates. Names. Bank accounts. Vendor companies. And signatures. My hands were shaking as I turned through them. Then I saw something. A signature. My father's. I looked at him. You signed this. His face hardened. I signed thousands of documents. This one authorized a transfer to Westbridge Consulting. I don't remember. You approved it. I said I don't remember. Mara quietly said, your grandfather did. My father turned on her. You have no right to destroy my reputation based on documents taken out of context. Mara reached into the folder. Then perhaps this will provide context. She placed a small digital recorder on the table. Derek immediately stood. What's that? A recording. My father looked at Mara. Where did you get it? Your father gave it to me. Nobody breathed. Mara pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the room. Older. Weaker. But unmistakable. Derek, I'm asking you one last time. Where did the money go? Derek's recorded voice answered. I told you. It went where it needed to go. Grandpa, you stole from the company. Derek, don't use that word. Grandpa, what word would you prefer? Silence. Then Derek said something that made my stomach turn. You already know Mom helped me. My mother made a small sound. I turned toward her. The recording continued. Grandpa asked, your mother? Derek answered. She moved the first payment. Dad handled the paperwork. My father closed his eyes. I couldn't move. For years, they had told me I was paranoid. For years, they had told me I was jealous. For years, they had told me I was the reason the family couldn't get along. And all three of them had known. Mara stopped the recording. My mother stood. Claire, please. I looked at her. Please what? We were trying to protect the family. From what? From losing everything. I stared at her. You were willing to let me lose everything. She started crying. That wasn't how it was. Then tell me how it was. She couldn't. My father stepped in. Enough. I turned toward him. No, it isn't enough. Derek suddenly shouted, you don't understand what Grandpa was like. I looked at him. He built the company. He controlled everything. He trusted you. He controlled me. I stared at him. For the first time, Derek didn't look like the golden child. He looked like a frightened man. And maybe that was the closest I had ever come to seeing the real Derek. Mara placed another document in front of me. This is the trust condition. I read it. If I accepted controlling ownership of Morgan Construction, I would be required to initiate an independent investigation into the company's finances. Any assets determined to have been improperly transferred would have to be recovered. Employee retirement contributions that had been reduced or withheld would have to be restored. And no member of the Morgan family could interfere with the investigation. I looked at Mara. Why would Grandpa do this? She answered quietly. Because he didn't leave you a company. She tapped the document. He left you a responsibility. My father scoffed. Don't romanticize this. Mara looked at him. Your father spent the final year of his life trying to repair what your family damaged. My mother whispered. Claire, if you take control, Derek loses everything. I looked at her. No. She looked confused. He loses whatever he was never entitled to. Derek stared at me. You'd really do this? I didn't answer. Because I was suddenly remembering something. A conversation with Grandpa from years earlier. We were sitting in his office. I had just found the first suspicious invoices. I had asked him why he didn't trust Derek. He had looked at me for a long time. Then he said, sometimes, Claire, the hardest thing about loving someone is refusing to protect them from the consequences of what they choose. At the time, I thought he was talking about me. He wasn't. The following morning, I accepted control of the trust. Not because I wanted revenge. Because employees had spent years trusting my grandfather to protect them. And apparently, I was the only person left willing to finish what he started. The independent investigation began within 48 hours. My family immediately tried to stop it. Derek hired an attorney. My father threatened to challenge the trust. My mother called relatives and told them I was destroying the family. I didn't respond. I didn't post anything online. I didn't give interviews. I didn't even tell anyone what I had learned. I simply waited, because the documents were speaking for themselves. 3 weeks into the investigation, the auditors found another set of accounts. Money had been transferred from the company into 2 properties in Arizona. Both properties were connected to Derek. Then they found payments to Westbridge Consulting. Then another company. Then another. The network was larger than Grandpa had initially believed. And eventually, investigators found something that made my blood run cold. A payment had been made shortly before I resigned from Morgan Construction. The payment had been approved using my credentials. But I hadn't approved it. Someone had used my login. The investigators traced the access. It came from a computer inside the executive office. Derek's office. I sat in the conference room staring at the report. My attorney asked, "Do you want to stop?" I looked at her. Why? Because this is going to become public. I thought about the years I had spent believing my family thought I was a failure. No, I said. Keep going. The next revelation was even worse. My father hadn't simply helped Derek after the fact. He had helped create the system. He had created shell contracts that made the transfers look legitimate. My mother had moved one of the initial payments through a charitable foundation connected to the family. She hadn't stolen the money herself. But she had known. And she had chosen silence. The investigation eventually reached the board. Then employees found out. Then outside attorneys got involved. And finally, Derek's attorney told him something I don't think he ever expected to hear. He needed to cooperate. Derek called me that night. I almost didn't answer. Claire. I said nothing. You're really doing this. I'm not doing anything to you. You know what I mean. I leaned against my kitchen counter. No, Derek. I don't. You're taking the company. No. Grandpa put the company into a trust. You know what happens if this investigation continues. Yes. My career is over. I was quiet. Then I said, "You should have thought about that before you used my name." Silence. Then he said, "I'm your brother." I closed my eyes. That sentence used to have power over me. Not anymore. You were my brother when you let everyone believe I was responsible. Claire, you were my brother when you watched Dad tell people I couldn't handle the business. I was scared. So was I. He didn't answer. I said, "That's the difference." I was scared and still told the truth. He hung up. A month later, Derek was removed from management. My father resigned from the board. My mother stepped down from the family foundation. The investigation was eventually referred to authorities because some of the financial conduct appeared to go beyond internal misconduct. Derek faced serious legal consequences. My father faced his own investigation. My mother wasn't charged with the same offenses, but the evidence made her role in concealing the truth impossible to ignore. And the family business? It survived. Not because of me alone. Because hundreds of employees had kept it alive while people at the top were busy protecting themselves. I restored the benefits that had been cut. I ordered new financial controls. I brought in independent board members. And I refused to give myself a special salary simply because Grandpa had left me control. Some people accused me of taking revenge. I didn't. Revenge would have meant destroying everything because I was angry. I wanted the company to survive. I wanted the employees to stop paying for decisions they hadn't made. And I wanted the truth to exist without anyone needing to approve it. 6 months after Grandpa's funeral, I went back to his old office. The room hadn't changed much. His desk was still there. His old leather chair. His collection of fountain pens. The photograph of me at 16, sitting beside him with a stack of accounting papers between us. I picked it up. Something felt strange. The frame was thicker than I remembered. I turned it over. A small folded piece of paper had been taped behind the photograph. My hands started shaking. I opened it. Grandpa had written it by hand. "Claire, if you're reading this, then you finally know." I sat down. The next sentence made my eyes burn. "You thought I stopped believing in you when I told you to walk away." I kept reading. I was actually trying to make sure your name never became attached to their choices. I covered my mouth. Then, you were always the one who asked why. Derek was always the one who asked how much. I laughed through tears. That sounded exactly like Grandpa. He continued. I know you wanted me to defend you publicly. I didn't because I was trying to determine how many people were willing to sacrifice you to protect themselves. I stopped reading. Because suddenly, the entire past 8 years looked different. The silence. The distance. The strange conversations. The way Grandpa had sometimes seemed cold. He hadn't stopped loving me. He had been watching. And perhaps he had been waiting. The final paragraph was short. Claire, I don't need you to forgive them. I need you to stop believing their version of you. That sentence stayed with me. For years, my family had told me who I was. Difficult. Sensitive. Jealous. Unsuccessful. A disappointment. I had spent years proving them wrong. But Grandpa's final letter made me realize something. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. My father eventually sent me a message. Your grandfather would be heartbroken by what you've done to this family. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. My mother sent another. We need to heal. I replied. Healing cannot begin with pretending nothing happened. Derek didn't contact me again for several months. When he finally did, it was a letter. Not an apology. Not at first. He wrote about pressure. About Grandpa. About feeling like his entire life had been measured against expectations he could never escape. I understood some of it. I even felt sorry for him. But understanding someone didn't erase what they had done. At the bottom of his letter, he wrote, I thought you were trying to take my place. I wrote back only once. I never wanted your place, Derek. I wanted you to stop taking mine. After that, I didn't hear from him again. And maybe that was okay. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean inviting someone back into your life. Sometimes forgiveness means finally refusing to let their choices determine who you become. A year after Grandpa's death, Morgan Construction was healthier than it had been in years. Employees who had once been afraid to speak could finally question management without worrying about family politics. The company adopted independent audits. The board stopped functioning like a family dinner. And I stopped hiding my connection to the company. But I also stopped pretending that owning it was the most important thing Grandpa had left me. One afternoon, I walked through the office and passed a group of employees discussing a project. Nobody noticed me. And for some reason, that made me smile. Because years ago, I had thought being invisible meant I had failed. Now I understood. Being underestimated had given me something my brother never had. The freedom to build a life without constantly performing for approval. I still missed Grandpa. I missed calling him when something strange happened. I missed the way he could look at a spreadsheet for 30 seconds and find the one number everyone else had ignored. But most of all, I missed the version of myself who had believed he would always be there. At his grave, months later, I finally said what I hadn't been able to say at the funeral. You were right. The wind moved through the trees. I was never the problem. I didn't know whether anyone could hear me. I didn't care. For years, my family had told me I didn't belong. At my grandfather's funeral, my father had tried to remove me from the room before the truth could reach me. My brother had told me Grandpa wanted nothing to do with me. My mother had begged me not to make trouble. But they had forgotten one thing. Grandpa had spent his final years making sure his last words could not be edited by the people who had controlled the family story for decades. His final letter didn't give me revenge. It gave me the truth. And the truth gave me a choice. I could spend the rest of my life trying to punish the people who had hurt me. Or I could build something they could no longer control. I chose the second. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destroying the people who underestimated you. Sometimes it's becoming so secure in who you are that their opinion no longer has the power to decide your worth. My family thought Grandpa's final letter would destroy us. In a way, they were right. It destroyed the version of our family built on silence. It destroyed the story that Derek was always right. It destroyed the lie that I had left because I was weak. And it destroyed the idea that loving someone meant protecting them from every consequence of their choices. But it didn't destroy me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the difficult daughter. I wasn't the jealous sister. I wasn't the family disappointment. I was simply Claire. And that was enough. If you were in my position, would you have accepted control of the family business and exposed the truth, or walked away and let the family deal with the consequences on their own?